So moving from the water grid, what is the state of the current power grid within the United States? Well, as we look at the grid, it's really a grid of grids called the macro grid. And the US electrical grid is comprised of more than 300,000 miles of electrical transmission lines that take electricity from power generation to transformers and up to 60,000 substations, where that power is then stepped down to lower voltage and transported along an additional 6 million miles of distribution lines to power the approximately 150 million buildings in the United States. So, this is the largest machine in the world and is also currently the most advanced electrical grid in the world. And as we look at the actual generation facilities as of April 22 and their distribution across the US, we can see that we have about 20,000 operating power plants with about 1,000 planned plants coming online. And this is a great report that was put together by the NPUC, which is the National Public Utility Council, and graphics created by the Visual Capitalist that really just show this flow of electricity generation through the major sectors down to the transmission lines, and then landing in distribution and consumption within the four major sectors of industrial, commercial, residential, and a very small amount of the electrical system is going to transportation. This is another incredible macro view of all of the energy flows in the US from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. And on the left-hand side, we can see all forms of generation as they flow through to the four major sectors. And we want to zoom in on the top to all electrical generation. And then as it flows, look at the large gray flow that's coming out of the orange. And we can see that of all the electrical power we generate, 65% is lost as what is called rejected energy. This is from inefficiency in generation to the amount that we lose through high transmission lines to stepping it down to different voltages to ultimately the inefficiencies that we have at the end use within the distribution and the consumption system. And then if we follow the petroleum energy flow, which powers most of the transportation sector, we can see that almost 60% is also lost of rejected energy. So this represents a massive opportunity for us to begin to heal these huge amounts of energy that are currently wasted from how much we're currently generating and producing. And then another major structural problem that we have within the grid is called the power system seam. And so the major grid has three major components, which is the Western interconnection, the Eastern interconnection, and the TRE, which is the Reliability Council of Texas. And while the Eastern and Western interconnects produce 950 gigawatts of generation, there's currently a seam that sits between them that only allows for 1.3 gigawatts of transfer capacity between them. So this seam represents a huge barrier in our ability to be able to share power between the major components of the macro grid. And this is a zoom in to look at that seam going down from Canada to Mexico. And we can see a lot of these key areas distributed across the states. And it's good to recognize that most of these interconnect ties were built in the 70s and 80s, and they are nearing or already at the end of their expected lifespans. And this is an amazing energy flow that comes from NREL, where we can see over the course of an individual day all of the generation and the energy flows between the different macro grid sections. And so this is nighttime. We're coming into 5 a.m. Eastern, and we'll see the solar begins to hit the East Coast, and you can see all the yellow, which is the solar, begin to come online, moving into the Midwest and then over to the West Coast. So as we see this huge amount of generation capacity and sharing between the grid, not only is the seam a problem, but because what we have the ability to do is as the solar begins to activate on the East Coast, it could begin to share and send power to the West Coast that's still in early morning. And then as the sun begins to set on the East Coast, power could flow from the Midwest and from the West Coast to begin to support it as nighttime comes. And these are some great generation and flow resources that you can follow to the NREL website. Thank you for taking the time to view this section of the United States agrivoltaic energy storage and EV microgrid market intelligence analysis. Really deeply hope that you've found this really valuable and hopefully inspiring. And if you're not watching the entire section on butterflypower.org, really encourage you to come and see all sections to get the totality of this amazing opportunity. And regardless of what channel you're finding this transmission, would be deeply appreciated if you give it some love, give it a like, and share it with a farmer or a rancher or anyone who's interested in participating in the regenerative transformation our economy, our energy sector, and our environment. Any investors who are looking at an amazing opportunity to transform their capital into the regenerative future. And it's just a deep honor and blessing to be here in this time and to participate in this great work. And we are the butterfly generation. It's time to rise and shine, time to transform and fly.